The question of youth employment, and that includes unemployment and all of those areas in the Caribbean. We have been having this discussion for the longest while in the Caribbean. I was just reflecting, in the last 5 years, we have had at least 10 major conferences in the Caribbean and studies and conferences in the Caribbean addressing the issue of youth employment, youth unemployment. There are all sorts of reports. There is a World Bank report from 2003 that deals with a number of issues including youth unemployment. And in fact, they captioned the report, "The House is on Fire." More recently, in 2010, there was the CRYC Commission on Youth Development, spoke about the issues of youth employment and some of those challenges. And in our election cycle, every time election comes around, it is one of the main features on the political platforms. Political parties promise all sorts of things, and they know it is, and how they feel so sad that young people are unemployed. Suffice it to say that a lot of the discourse, a lot of what has been put forward as possible approaches and measures, in terms of my own research, suggests a couple of things. One, that a lot of the discourse and a lot of the programs that have been put forward, they proceed on a couple of assumptions. And as to whether those assumptions are in fact true, or whether they can be rejected, like those of the statistics would know about the rejection of the null hypothesis. And one of the assumptions is that the prevailing socio-political or socio-economic structure really is conducive to creating decent work opportunities for all young people. That's an assumption. Now, I'm not sure that assumption is true at all. It's also an assumption that the prevailing socio-political or socio-economic structure is there and it is working in a way that it is creating economic empowerment for all young people. From what I have seen in my short years on the face of this earth, I don't think so in the Caribbean. That is not correct. But most of those programs operate on that assumption. So you hear people come up with issues like, well, we must fix the education system, and we must collect more data, and we must, do a lot of those little things that, not that they are not significant, okay? But we do a lot of those little things that we chase after them, and in the Caribbean, in the recent past, the question of youth entrepreneurship was the big idea, so everybody was chasing that as the magic wand to solve whatever unemployment problem that they have. And so, having reflected, having done some research on the whole thing, I am increasingly of the view that yes, governments and others may be well-intentioned in terms of trying to put programs and projects in place, presumably to get most of the young people involved in gainful employment. But I believe there is an absence of what I would describe as a strategic framework. And that strategic framework, to my mind, is important both in terms of guiding the quality of interventions that governments and others make, as well as being able to measure. Because as it is now, what we seem to be measuring in terms of youth employment or unemployment is our statistics department measuring whether the unemployment has gone up or it has gone down. Or if there is a government project to provide employment for young people, as to politicians boasting that this project has employed 5,000 young people and so you must vote for us again. I don't know that there is that fundamental assessment of what is happening. And so I've begun to develop some kind of a framework that I'd want to put before the Caribbean governments. What I would share with you today is just a couple points that would, would form that framework. A kind of a framework that they should, I believe, government should undertake in terms of looking at the question of youth employment. To my mind, there could be no serious national or regional or sub-regional initiative to provide decent work for young people that is bereft of a clearly defined philosophical perspective. Because it is going to determine whether that succeeds or not. Right? Is it that the employment strategy we are looking to put for young people, is it rights-based? Is it that we recognize young people's socioeconomic right, the right to work? Or is it that the program is driven by a mindset of a social welfare mindset? So we have a set of young people who are not employed and they may give us trouble, they may get involved in antisocial behavior, and so we come with a social welfare measure to try and address, not to satisfy the right to employment, to address what we perceive as possible problems young people might get involved in because they're not working. The other, under the philosophical aspect, are they seeing the question of youth, of decent work for young people from a standpoint, is it driven by what I would describe as a deficit discourse? That will set up these young people down the road and they're wasting time, and so we pity them and we're looking to get work, we're looking to get programs of employment for them. Or is it that we see that the population of young people with skills, with education, the investment we have made in education, are we seeing them as an asset for the transformation of our country or for the development of our country? And therefore, the programs we're putting together is to build on that asset in terms of transforming our societies, rather than seeing it as young people who may create problems and we're looking to get work for them. Right? Coming out of that philosophical thing is also the question of how are these programs conceptualized? Many of the programs I have seen in the Caribbean, I would say 99% of them were conceptualized by some prime minister who jumps on a political platform and say, we will do this for you, but we'll have this program that will employ 1,000 young people every 6 months. Young people are not in the main involved in an integral way in designing, conceptualizing those employment programs. And to my mind, if you're talking about providing decent work for young people, it makes no sense if young people are not involved in the conceptualization of those programs and involved in implementing the programs as well. So therefore, the question of the degree of youth participation is critical. Okay, so we have the philosophy, but now we have to determine whether young people are participating in that process. Okay, in the process. More than just the young people participating in the process as well, is in the Caribbean, when you look at many of the initiatives, the initiatives are so disjointed that sometimes the Ministry of Youth has a program, they say, to deal with youth employment. And the Ministry of Commerce has one. And the Ministry of Labor has one. In the same government, a set of different programs, but they all disjointed. One is not linked to the other. They don't know what the other is doing. More than that, some of those programs are managed by politically appointed persons. There isn't that broad-based supervision or management of those programs to ensure that there is equity. So that in many of the programs, you hear complaints about young people not benefiting because they may not have supported the political party in power, or they may be young people living in very challenging circumstances who are totally left out. They're excluded from the process. Okay? So, because the thing is being managed by some political appointee or the other, or it is just being managed by the civil service staff in the Ministry of Youth or the other. It doesn't have, civil society is not involved. Young people are not involved in the management of those programs. So to allow for the kind of transparency and the kind of equity that you want and the kind of inclusivity that you want in those programs. So that really is a big problem. Another aspect that is lacking, and I think certainly should be as part of a framework for trying to provide decent work opportunities for young people. And in the same way that these programs are so disjointed, you hardly recognize any serious link between many of those youth employment programs and the broader macroeconomic strategy. Okay, so when you hear, for instance, governments talk about, we are going to provide a youth entrepreneurship program, I have not heard in the Caribbean a Minister of Finance presenting the budget or the estimates of the expenditure make any link between the strategy to increase the gross domestic product and how is it that youth entrepreneurs or youth employment is going to contribute to that. Yeah? Youth, unemployed young people, on one hand, unemployed young people are seen as more of a liability, as more as a drain on the budget, rather than an asset in terms of being able to contribute to the gross domestic product. And the youth entrepreneurs, you have seen, there are no figures provided by the Ministry of Finance to say that in the last 10 years, based on these youth entrepreneurship programs we have, this is how much the young entrepreneurs have contributed to the gross domestic product or to economic growth over the last how many years, you know? And so it says something that those youth employment programs are not integrated into the broader macroeconomic strategy. And to me, it should be. The final point that I want to make is in terms of, coming back more specifically to the measurement. And we hear they talk about we need to measure this youth employment strategies and we need to do this and that. But I ask the question of that, what is it are we measuring? Are we satisfied if, like I said before, measuring whether 500 young people benefited from this program? Okay? Or whether government spent $5 million in the program? Or whether the program was implemented and the money was spent without any unaccounted for funds? To my mind, certainly any strategy for youth employment cannot be satisfied with just that as its framework for measurement of success. What is it that the youth employment is supposed to do? Youth employment is supposed to contribute to empowerment. It's supposed to empower, provide for the economic and political empowerment of young people. Okay? Are we measuring empowerment? Do we even have a framework for the measurement of empowerment? In the Caribbean, certainly not. Much less us being able to determine how much does or how much has the employment program contributed to the empowerment of a group of young people or the population of young people. To me, this is what we're supposed to be measuring. Okay? And so therefore, to my mind, as we go forward, the governments cannot continue with these disjointed programs. They cannot continue those programs that they've pulled out from the top of their hat on a political platform. That those programs must be must be driven by of course, empirical evidence, that it must be youth participation in every aspect of those programs, that the programs must be integrated into the broader national development strategy, and that the programs are not a means of social welfare for young people who we deem as troublemakers down the road. That these programs must be conceptualized in a way that they are contributing to the empowerment of young people and the transformation of the societies. Thank you.